Welcome to the Badaboom podcast. On today's episode, Chris and I talk about Black Adam, the movie, and the announcement of Henry Cavill returning as Superman to the DCEU. Listen in to hear our thoughts.
Hey, what's up, guys?
What's
Welcome
up?
to the Badaboom podcast. We have a very special episode. Sadly, we're here to report the hierarchy of the DC universe has not changed. That hierarchy of power is still relatively the same because Black Adam was not great.
Yeah, it was terrible.
Yeah. You know, there were some fun elements. Obviously, the things everyone was excited for, the JSA, Dr. Fate, Hawkman, those are really cool elements. But, you know, The Rock was cast in this 15 years ago, and it feels like the script that they had 15 years ago is the one they went with. Some really poor supporting characters. A villain, the movie was so focused on making Black Adam, look like a badass that they forgot, like, oh yeah, this movie probably should have a villain, and I guess it should have the power to defeat him, maybe, but don't make it look like we don't want Black Adam to look like a bitch. We wouldn't want that. So, so maybe he gets one lick in, but that's about it, And just to show how powerful Black Adam is, he's gonna literally rip the villain in half. And I've already said it because that's a spoiler, but spoilers for Black Adam. But not that there's much to spoil at this point.
Yeah.
Because The Rock himself, Dwayne Johnson, has spoiled the most important part of the movie, which is officially announced now. So this is, again, not a spoiler because it's everywhere now. But Henry Cavill's back as Superman. And that is one of the other cool parts. It was cool to see him, and not just his silhouette or, his head cut off.
Yeah.
It was actually his face in the suit. They gave him an extra curl. So that was really cool. But what did you think, Troy? Funny enough, what you thought is exactly what I thought. So asking that, I'm just asking you to tell other people, but I know exactly how you feel about it.
I mean, dude, I think it's the same thing. I feel like we had a lot of characters in this movie, and we didn't focus on the character who has his name in the title. Like,
Well, they did. He's in it a lot, but what happened was, like, his story's not interesting at all. The story they went with, at least, the story of him, his son, leading an uprising and getting the power of the wizard and saving him and stuff. It's like, oh, like, I kind of want a movie about that kid, not not
exactly.
you. I think it would have been far more interesting if they, went toward that. Hey, he actually was a villain. He actually was like full on bad, and that's why. And that story's been told wrong through all these years, and him awakening is something bad. And even that, like, when Superman comes along, you're like, that fight that's been hyped up for so long of Black Adam and Superman. It's like, what would they have to fight over? He's a good guy. There's nothing to fight over. If Black Adam was the Shazam villain and trying to kill a teenage boy, then yes, they might have a beef. But right now, they have nothing to fight over. And the way they've set it up, it's like, oh, Black Adam's the most powerful, being on Earth. And, Superman is the most powerful thing in the universe. And it's like, who says that except The Rock? Who says that?
Yeah, it's
no
only
one.
The Rock.
No one reads a Black Adam comic and it's like, oh wow, like, if Superman and him went face to face, it's like no one fucking wants to see that. I think people want to see more of The Rock, which is great. I think he's a movie star, and the reason this movie even happened with no Shazam is because of him. And I do want to shout him out because he did, put a lot of effort into bringing the JSA, and obviously Henry Cavill's only back because of him, his production company, his agent, which he shares with Henry Cavill. So, kudos to him for being like that. He's a movie star in every sense of the word, very much like Tom Cruise, like, hey, I want this movie to be this, that. But sometimes you need to tell people no. And this was one of those things that the studio should have been like, Black Adam as a standalone hero. Not only does this not work, but we're also devaluing a character that does work, which is Shazam.
Yeah.
So if you watch the trailer for Shazam 2, when you go see Black Adam, you're like, man, that movie looks like it could use Black Adam.
Yo, I think that's every Shazam movie. It looks like it could use Black Adam. And honestly, if they had done Black Adam with Shazam, that's like you said, that's how you set up introducing Superman into it. There's a fight between Black Adam and Shazam. Superman's on Shazam's side, and then Superman's got to confront Black Adam. But if they went down that path and Superman confronted Black Adam in Black Adam's own movie, it's like, okay, cool. We had Batman versus Superman. Now we're gonna have Black Adam versus Superman. It's like we're only gonna get these versus Superman movies, maybe, but it just doesn't play to this character being a strong character. And one of the biggest parts in the movie that I was like, this is so annoying, and like it doesn't even feel like we're really trying to have character development. We're just trying to like throw some tropes out there. Is that scene when Black Adam's like floating down those staircases and that kid is going down the stairs and telling him like, "Oh, you need a catchphrase. Oh, you need to do this. You need to do this." And then he does it like literally 3 or 4 minutes later. It's like, yeah, I guess that's something that we would all want to see like in a movie, or like something you would just put in naturally. But then you don't even really focus on Black Adam really after that. It's a whole bunch more of this kid, his mom, and that family. And it just feels like the character development of Black Adam is like a straight line of like, you got from here to here, instead of like, oh, we see these ups and downs, and there's these conflicts, and there's these doubts and whatnot. It just is like so dry. It doesn't, when we got the JSA on screen, and we saw these characters interacting, I was like, okay, this is giving me a little bit Guardians of the Galaxy vibes. I think this might, work out. This might be pretty cool. And Shazam's gonna kind of, or not Shazam, Black Adam's gonna be the rogue one, maybe a little bit like Rocket, or someone's gonna really push the envelope with the entire team. And then that really kind of just doesn't happen because their stories just get so far split that like all the character development that you would have seen with JSA happens with just The Rock and this family in the movie. And it doesn't really, it feels like there's just telling like 3 different stories the entire time instead of one whole story.
One thing that's frustrating about the JSA is that they come in, they're like, hey, heroes don't kill, they don't do this, they don't do that. But everyone Black Adam is killing is like not just a bad guy, not like a thief. It's like, oh, these are actual war criminals. So it's like, hey, actually, if they went before a judge, they probably would get the death penalty. This is not like these are situations where you're like, actually, you're not presenting a really compelling argument. So the central piece of like their conflict, you're like, well, one side doesn't really have an argument, so why is this even an argument? And going back to like, hey, like, the kid and the mom, they had nothing to do, even things that they'd had to do. For example, the mom, where she finds the crown, you're like, wait, that crown was behind like one rock. You didn't, there was like no death traps. There was no, hey, like, let me use this necklace to like, as a key to unlock like a secret door or anything like that. It was just like there. And it was right behind the intergang mine. And you're like, how the fuck they didn't find this? This is like, it's like right there, and
Yeah.
there's nothing that they set up in terms of her history, her heritage, that's like, hey, she has a special connection to this.
They do, and I realize it's so BS that it's like, why would they even do this? So, in one of the flashback scenes where you see Black Adam's wife and son being killed, the necklace that the mom is wearing is the same as Black Adam's wife is wearing. But I'm like, okay, someone had to steal that off of her because Black Adam didn't have any other kids. Like,
but it's set up and payoff, right? So you see that, right? But what is set up to say, like, hey, like my family, like the foremost people when it comes to knowledge around Kondak and figuring these things out. There's nothing that says like, oh, like she knows every. And then I could jump around a lot because there's a lot of big fucking plot holes in the movie. But even the fucking gang where they're like, oh, I see this kid every day, and then he gets a little thing that says, oh, like the mom is wanted. Wouldn't you know that kid?
exactly.
Like you would have kidnapped that kid. And also, it's not like they live in a bunker, hide out, like live on the outskirts of Kondak. They live right in the middle, and I'm sure you can find their address.
Yeah, and the Intergang has like no big boss. It's like who's people reporting to? Like the I can't remember what his name is. If it's like Isaiah or Isaac or the guy that
I think
ends
it's
up
Ishmael.
Ishmael, yeah, the guy that ends
Yeah.
up wearing the crown. Like he's not their boss. It seems like he's like reporting to someone bigger, but like he's the villain. In the beginning, they do say that the mom is like a professor of all things in that area, and like she's left the country many times. But like, I don't feel like that's enough to like
It's
really
like
establish.
wobbly. It's like a like
Yeah,
one sentence and nothing. It really does anything to establish that. Like for example, when she reads the crown, for the I forget what the quote is, but she's reading it is
like in death, there's life, but it's really
yeah,
like
yeah. Well, life is death is like leads to death or something like that. And then she
yeah,
realizes she was reading it backwards is actually death leads to life, which is, the villain is killed and then he's given eternal life, he goes to hell and then he becomes Sabak. You're like, wouldn't you know that? It's not like the things that they put in this movie, you're like, oh, like if this was put in like an Indiana Jones or an Uncharted game, there'd be a little bit more that like blocks. It's like a simple like snap of the fingers, like, oh, that's the answer, and it's like, why couldn't anyone figure that out? It doesn't take an archaeology degree or much history to know like, oh wait, this crown, like we're reading this upside down, so we should probably read it the other way.
yeah,
It's not even like, oh, like I needed a special machine or anything like
yeah.
that.
And honestly, if they had found that out and they were like, we have to not let him die, and his whole plan is to get Black Adam to kill him, and the JSA was having to protect Ishmael from Black Adam, that would have been a much better like story point and a much better arc because eventually the JSA would fall and Black Adam would kill him, but then he would just come back right away and be like, okay, I'm now the conqueror and I'm going to like take over Konda, and Black Adam would have to be like, "Oh crap, I messed up. I have to restrain myself. I can't just kill people all the time." And then boom, there's your story arc, and then the JSA and him team up and they fight, and then they take down the villain. But nope, we have to have him imprisoned. We have to have Amanda Waller. We have to have him go to the Arctic. We have to have Doctor Fate die. Like they were much, and Doctor Fate could have still died. Black Adam could have killed Doctor Fate. Like there's much better ways we could have had like just the last hour of this movie go through and we would have less of this mom and son kind of duo diverting the story to them. Like it could have been way better, but
I wouldn't have mind their story if it made sense at a time. Like I would
yes.
like actually like the kid to actually be Khaled, the Doctor Fate, so that would have been an interesting like through line through the movie where if you make him closer to Dr. Fate gives him the cape, tells him about like what it means to be a hero and all those things. That would be interesting. And obviously having his mom being archaeologist and stuff like that, you could have made little hints of like, oh, like he's actually really into medicine and stuff. It's just this movie's so focused on making Black Adam look like a badass, like the most powerful thing in the DC universe. Everything else is secondary. And it feels that way. I will say, compared to the last couple Marvel movies, the special effects were on point, except for Sabak, the big villain. But that's because he's only on screen for like the last 10 minutes. But I did like some of the action scenes. But sadly, all of them are like so heavily. I wouldn't even say inspired. They're like straight ripoffs from other like superhero movies where it fails to ever feel like Black Adam, like what's special about Black Adam? The only part that I was like, this is very unique to this character, and this is like, something they really developed for this was, his intro where he's in the cave. You're like, oh, this is badass. This
Yeah.
feels like Blade. And then immediately when he gets out and it's like, he's mowing down a whole wave of inner gang soldiers, I'm like, why did they rip this from X-Men Apocalypse? The slow-mo thing, like you're like, I never saw Black Adam as having this type of power, but okay. And then, there's some other things where you're like, this feels very like, the scene where, he's he has that Mexican standoff and he just shoots all three characters and you're like, I've seen this before. And
Yeah.
it's not like it never feels unique or special to this specific movie. And things pay homage to other films and stuff like that. But like there has to be something that's special about this. When I first saw X-Men First Class and X-Men Apocalypse, I was like, oh my God, they figured out how to do the speedster. This is so unique. This is so this scene. When you watch Zack Snyder's Justice League, when you see, Barry go through the Speed Force, you're like, this is so specific and unique to this character. There was nothing in this movie that felt like, oh wow. Actually, there was more to do with like Dr. Fate, where you're like, oh, that's interesting. But even that, you're like,
That's similar to Doctor Strange.
yeah, very Doctor Strange. And, in the movie, they referred to him having godlike powers. And you're like, I don't know. He just seems like an illusionist in this.
Yeah.
There's nothing godlike about him. And,
I will say Doctor Fate's like touching the helmet and getting like those glimpses into the future, and his like teleporting just to be like, oh, like I already know a little bit of the future because I know they're gonna come and like fight right here. I'm gonna
yeah.
teleport over to the couch. And he got some his own unique things. Like I am 100% sure sales of Altoids are going to go up for anybody that is a fan of Doctor Fate. But I think they could have made it a lot more original for The Rock, and like they could have also put in some flashbacks, like especially in that Mexican standoff scene. If they
Mhm.
would have just had like someone with like a sniper rifle higher up, like shoot a bullet down, but like miss, then they could have done like a quick flashback to like the arrow that killed his
Yeah.
son. And then it would have been like, oh, wait, what was that flashback? It would get more people interested. And then you don't have to have so much music in this because, like, every 30 seconds, they're like, hey, let's play a different song. And it's because Warner Brothers has a huge catalog of music they can access like that. But
Yeah, it's funny. It felt very much like the original Suicide Squad, where it kept playing
yes,
these songs and needle drops, and you're like, "Is this really necessary right now?" And obviously now with what's happened, you're like, "Oh, maybe they shouldn't have put that Kanye West song in there." But we're talking about it, and part of the reason we're kind of like, workshopping a lot of things. We wanted the movie to be better. We felt like, oh, this is DC needed a win in a lot of ways, even though they've had some wins this year with the Batman and Peacemaker were great. But you really felt like, oh wow, the hierarchy of power might really change. But it hasn't. I think coming out of this, obviously Henry Cavill is back, but even that is relying on this being a huge success because technically Henry does not have a deal to be back.
yeah.
So they want to make more Superman. They want to work more with Henry. Obviously, Walter Hamada, who was kind of the person that was blocking a lot of that, is gone. But that company's still going through a lot of turmoil. It still doesn't have someone that is the head of DC. So what's to say they hire someone next week and they're like, you know what? We actually need a younger Superman.
I really don't think that's going to happen.
I didn't think Batgirl was going to get canceled. I thought that was something that never happened. That doesn't happen in movies, period. So we're dealing with a crazy situation in terms of this company, particularly Warner Brothers, and now Warner Brothers Discovery has been sold for parts twice in the last like 5 years, and it might possibly be sold a third time. So anything is possible. As much as I'm excited that Henry's back, until I am sat in a theater with the the previews playing for a Superman movie with Henry Cavill, I'm just gonna be like, it might happen, it might not.
So let's say it's 2024 or 2025. You're in a theater and that Superman trailer comes on. Are we seeing Superman fight Black Adam in his second movie, or are we seeing him fight someone else? What is this next thing that you feel that Henry Cavill Superman is going to tackle?
I just hope it's a Superman story. We haven't gotten the chance to see him be Superman. His first movie, he was learning. That's why he snaps Zod's neck, or at least that's what people who defend that say. And BVS, he was coming into his own, but immediately he was stabbed in the heart. And then Justice League, we got to see that towards the end, that last part. But I would love to see him be Superman. I think a lot of people want to see that. So hopefully it's a story that really focuses on, not trying to modernize Superman, but, just make a solid, good Superman movie where, he has a villain that, tests him physically and emotionally. But I just want to see it, it's crazy, as he was being announced, his return was being announced, we're getting the trailer for the third Ant-Man movie. And we've only had one Superman movie in the last 9 years. So I think that's just what people want. They just want it. Whatever it is, they want to see it.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of ideas I think that could happen for it, and like I feel that is also the weakness of a second Superman movie is we have all these ideas and we've been wanting to use them for so long. Let's cram as much as we possibly can into one movie. But just like off the top of my head, I'm like, it'd be great if we explored more kryptonite, like different colors of kryptonite, like how they did in Smallville, and maybe we see a little bit of red kryptonite, and then he teams up with Lobo because he's like, that's like just the opposite of who Superman is like kind of like Lobo, and then but that's only like a small portion of the movie, and if you make that a big portion of a movie, it's like, oh wow, this went all over the place probably.
Yeah.
But I think it'd be cool just to have some different colors of kryptonite in it because that's something we've only really seen in some of the comics, but like it was a big part of Smallville when I was watching that as a kid, and I always loved learning about how many different colors of kryptonite there were and how they affected him. And we also just don't know how many more movies they're going to do. Different colors of kryptonite could be something that they use in a Justice League movie or something to turn him, or in a different movie he teams up with or something. Like the thing is, we just don't have a map. We don't have there's no big plan, and so anything could get thrown in anywhere, and that's where it gets really fishy and kind of muddy. And it's kind of a bit of what happened to Black Adam. There's not a map. It's just, hey, let's throw all this stuff in together and we'll have a product that hopefully people will go see. But there's not like a roadmap to create those filters of like, that's a bad idea. That's a great idea. Like, well, we can't do that because we want to do that here.
Exactly. With DC is a lot less predictable, whereas with Marvel, you're like, oh, it seems like they're working towards some multiverse thing, maybe Secret Wars. Here it's just like, hey, just take it a movie at a time.
Yeah, who knows if we're going to get sold by the time we start writing the next movie.
Exactly. And with that, guys, bada boom.
Bada boom.
Thank you for listening to the Badaboom podcast. Keep the conversation going on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. Get in the comments on our YouTube channel and let us know what you'd like to hear next. And please subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you listen.